Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll give others just a minute or two to connect to the meeting, and then we'll get started. And we'll give people just another minute, and then we'll get rolling with the webinar. All right, we are at 2 minutes in, so we will get started. Thank you this morning for everyone taking time out of your day to join for coffee with Crestwood. Little housekeeping. We have disabled everyone's mic, but please feel free to put questions in the chat. There will be time at the end for any questions as well. We'll go through any that are received. This morning, our webinar is going to be on maximizing supplier relationships. My name is Sean Garrity. I'm a client success manager here at Crestwood, and I'll be setting the stage for our webinar this morning. Along with me is Robert Sternberg, who is our director of Acumatica Services. He'll be walking us through some slides to discuss maximizing supplier relationships and providing some information on how best to do this. As you can see on the screen, we have some key topics that we're going to discuss today. I think most of you probably realize that building trust and respect with your vendors is one of the key things that's going to make your relationships more successful. Along with that, effective communication is also very important, and having the data to do that is critical to being successful with this. So we're going to show some tips for being able to do that and how to get that information out of your Acumatica system. And at this point, I will turn the show over to Robert, and we will dive into the details here.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thanks, Sean. I just wanted to start with a quick quote today. So, success is the sum of small efforts repeated day in and day out. So, that's by Robert Coyer. And I thought it would be a nice theme for today. So, we're going to be looking at some low effort ways to bring high value into your system. And Robert Coyer was an American author in the 20th century. So, just a fun fact as we jump right in. And Sean, I'll have you take us forward one slide for us, please. Fantastic. So we'll start with three key things that we're going to look at today for supplier performance. The first is going to be spend trend. So this is a way with the data in your system today, we can see which vendors we are spending the most amount of time with and that we should build those relationships. The second is return count. And this is how many items we need to send back to the vendor for one reason or another. And the last, I want to give some quick overview to some of the most popular supplier performance metrics that we have requests for at Crestwood. So we'll jump right in with spend trend. So to look at spend trend, we're going to be using a generic inquiry in your system today. So that generic inquiry is purchase orders. And Sean, if you go forward one, we'll look at purchase orders. This is an out-of-the-box generic inquiry. You're probably in this screen all the time. What you might not spend as much time on is the option to save as pivot. So in the upper right-hand corner, you see the option to use the ellipses and click Save as Pivot. And when you click that button, you'll see a pop-up on your screen. And that pop-up will let you name the pivot, and it will also allow you to choose to share that pivot with others. So Sean, let's show them that screen as well. And if you uncheck that second box, you're actually going to leave that pivot just for yourself. So you want to check that box. If you want to share this with the rest of your team, that's the best way to do it. Once you click that OK button, you're going to see the ability to create a new pivot screen. It's broken into a couple of different sections, and we'll walk through each section individually. So the left is all of the fields that are available inside of the generic inquiry. And you can use any of these actions and pull them into the other areas. So the next section is rows. And inside of the rows section, we're going to be talking about the data that you can pull directly into the screen. So in this example, that might be something like our actual supplier name or our vendor name in Acumatica. As we move through, we're also going to cover the column section. And the column section is where I like to pull in information on dates. So dates is a great way to pull in trend information into Acumatica. And as we work our way through, we're going to see different options for those dates as well. So we're going to have different separation groups. We can pull this out by something like quarter as well. The next section is going to be values. And as we look at the values section, this is going to be the data. And it's important to pay attention to the values section, particularly when you're creating pivots, because we're aggregating data. And when we aggregate data into the system, we need to determine how we want to aggregate that information to make sure that we're grabbing maybe the sum of values or counts. So we're going to look at a couple of examples of that today. And the last section is going to be properties. So as we work our way into the properties section, that's when our pivot table comes together. So we're going to look at that in just a moment. Sean, can you give me a quick thumbs up and let me know you can see my screen? Wonderful. Thank you so much. So this is where we're seeing the information on properties inside of Acumatica, and I'm highlighting some of the information for the dates. So we can round that date information up to the year and down to the minute. So as we're aggregating data, specifically for supplier performance metrics, we might choose to evaluate our suppliers on a month-by-month basis. In the rows section, just like I mentioned, we're going to add vendor name. In the values, we're going to add order total. And on the right-hand side, I'm making sure that that aggregate is set to sum. As we're looking at vendor trends month by month, I want to make sure we're looking at all of their orders in a sum total format. To leave your pivot table set up, you'll click the gear icon in the upper right, and that's going to show you some data inside of Acumatica, that aggregation. I have the top area highlighted on my screen, and those are the columns. So this is broken out month by month, just as we set on the previous screen. So you can see the year followed by the hyphen and the month in each column. On the left-hand side, I have all of the rows. So we're aggregating this by vendor. And a tip inside of our pivot table is that you can actually sort this information. And that's where we're going to draw several of the insights and metrics for purchase order trends over time, is by sorting our different columns. So you can see how a vendor is changing and how we're working with that vendor. Now, as we go through, Acumatica's pivot tables have native drill down capability. So if you click on any of the numbers on this screen, just like I'm highlighting here, we can get to the source data behind the entry itself. And that's incredibly helpful as we're going to move forward with a couple of other examples. So this is what drill down looks like inside of an Acumatica pivot table. And you'll notice a new tab was added at the top of my screen. That is temporary. So that's not a permanent filter. That's just temporary. It's going to show drill down and it's going to display only the information that we clicked on from the previous screen. If we want to return, we can use the permanent saved filter at the top of the page that we called vendor ordering trends earlier. So this will help us navigate inside of Acumatica. Now that we've covered some of the basics of pivot tables, I want to apply that to another metric we have requested quite often. And this is going to be return count. And this is an interesting metric because both of the metrics we're looking at today, you can build with out-of-the-box data as quick as this call. Take 30 minutes after this, take your cup of coffee that I hope you're drinking right now, and create the two metrics that we're covering today. The second metric is going to be our return count, and we're going to start on the purchase receipts screen. We'll enter the pivot configuration using the save as function before and have a very similar setup. So in my rows section, I'm using the vendor name. In the column section, I'm using date. And the difference for this metric is for the values, I'm using the aggregate count all for the value of receipt number. So we can see count all under the aggregate. That would be a difference than the sum. You might start with something like this if you want to break this out by half years. And then eventually, as we break into more data, you're going to see trends on vendor returns over time. So we're going to talk about some different ways that you can use this information, but this can certainly be viewed as a scorecard of sorts. Right? And that information we want to bring back to our vendors. We want to have conversations. When we see higher return rates, it means that a link in the communication channel can possibly be broken. So we need to do further analysis with drill down and determine, are our orders being fulfilled properly? Maybe we can make some adjustments for clarity on our side for ordering. Maybe it's a quality concern. So just this piece of information, you can make serious improvements to how we operate with some of our top vendors. So what are some other metrics that we help customers create? And what are some of the most common requests? Well, on-time performance is a great one to consider. As we're placing information in the system, we're providing data, and Acumatica has fields to place the expected arrival date. It's called promised on, and we can certainly adjust that and then report on it going forward. The next is going to be vendor and item lead time. These are two discrete components inside of Acumatica. First would be vendor lead time, and that could simply be the amount of time that the shipping or fulfillment process takes from the vendor location. We could expand on that to item lead time, and this would tell us any additional time it would take to fulfill a specific item. So maybe our vendor has to manufacture that good before it can enter the fulfillment and shipping process. We can record that at the item level in Acumatica, and we can calculate historicals so that we're more accurate going forward. And the last common request for performance metrics that I'm covering today is order accuracy. Right? It goes back to what we mentioned before in return rates. So are we getting the quantity of goods fulfilled? Are they billing us the proper amount? Are we having it fulfilled in single shipments or a number of shipments? All of this is incredibly important, and it's something that we build constantly. So how do we take this information and enhance our collaboration with our vendors? We need to enhance some of the functions in Acumatica. Again, one of the themes of today is what are some small adjustments we can make for some big wins? And then going forward, how do we automate that collaboration? So the first thing we're going to look at is an email template inside of Acumatica. This is an out-of-the-box email template. And as you create purchase orders, you have the option to send that purchase order through email to your vendor. And this is the template that is sent when you initiate that action. So in the message details down below, I've added just a single line. It's just plain text. We'll look at expanding that in just a moment. But it says, please respond with your estimated delivery window. And the concept behind metrics is we need information in our system to report on. So making sure that we're building that relationship with our vendor, even with something as simple as asking them to respond with estimated delivery, is incredibly important. That's what builds our relationships and makes the data in our systems more valuable. We can take that to reports. We can take that to dashboards and scorecards. If we focus on the automate element, it takes two components in Acumatica. We can start with some out-of-the-box fields and link them with something in Acumatica called business events. And business events are incredibly powerful. We've talked about them before on Coffee with Crestwood, and they let us take action on events inside of our system. So it's an if this, then that type of scenario. They can also be scheduled, and that's important for our next step in the process. Hopefully, many of you are familiar with the promised on field in purchase orders. How many of you are updating it as your orders get confirmed? How many of you are leaving it at the default value from just the date? This is a tool that you have in Acumatica today. I'd like you to go through, look at your purchase orders, and analyze how you're using this field. Maybe we take a more creative approach if we want to have better interactions with our vendors. Maybe we set that promised on date out into the future until it's confirmed, right? We just asked our vendors, please reply. Let us know when we're expected to receive our product. So with a promised on date out into the future and business events, we can have more interaction in the email templates. So now I've expanded that text and I said, we have not yet received confirmation on this order. I know that because my promised on date is so far out in the future, I'm using that as a trigger. Say, please respond and validate the order will arrive within 2 days of our estimated arrival date. We're taking that and calculating it in a generic inquiry based on the vendor's lead time and maybe even the item lead time if we want to enter that level of rigor. And we're even adding a vendor score. So this is letting them know, here's your on-time performance. And we can set this to different levels for vendors so that they'll receive follow-up emails with scheduled business events until that date is not set to the year 2099. So we can do this with customization, but this example in particular is showing you how we can use out-of-the-box fields, generic inquiries, pivot tables, all of the tools that we talked about today to bring more interaction to our vendors. So if you need any help with this at all, this is something that we love doing. We love optimizing processes and bringing better communication with your vendors. And with that, I'll leave 10 minutes or so in case there's any questions and turn it over to Sean.
Thank you, Robert. That was some great information you shared. Please let me know if there are any questions. You can feel free to add them in the chat and we're happy to respond to them. It does look like I have one question. Robert, can you address how do we add pivot tables to dashboards?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So dashboards in Acumatica are made up of something called widgets in the system. And one of Acumatica's widgets is actually the pivot table widget. So I'll actually pull that up in just a moment and drop that in the chat if anyone is interested on how to add some of those pivot tables to dashboards. And in fact, we can take some of the data that's calculated from the pivot tables and turn them into tiles themselves with total counts of returns for the quarter. We can turn them into purchasing trends over time and show you if your purchasing trends overall are going up or down. So it's a really good question and deeper, because I'd love to explore dashboards maybe in a future Coffee with Crestwood. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that answer. Yes, and we can definitely assist with any request if clients are interested in learning more about that. So feel free to reach out to your CSM at Crestwood, and we're more than happy to assist. Are there any additional questions? I would love to continue answering questions for you folks. We do have 9 minutes left in the webinar, so if you do have any questions, please feel free to enter them in the chat, and we're happy to respond for you. I don't see any additional questions at this time. So as a quick recap here, we are able to quickly create metrics and reports. We can convert metrics to dashboards and vendor reports. And this will allow you to proactively communicate vendor performance and expectations. If there's anything that you need assistance with, Crestwood is more than happy to help. We can have someone in touch with you as quickly as this afternoon, probably, if you're looking to dive into things right away, or if you would prefer to schedule a time to speak with your CSM and then get our consulting team involved, we'd be happy to do that as well. So just let us know what we can do to help you, and we're more than happy to do so. I don't see any questions coming into the chat, so I guess we will wrap up and we'll give everybody a few minutes back in their day. But we'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to attend today and learn from us. I do see that Robert dropped some additional information in the chat, so if anybody would like to take a look at that, you're more than welcome to. If you'd like to take a screenshot, you're welcome to grab, but we will be sharing the recording with everybody who registered for the webinar anyway, so you don't have to feel like you have to grab that piece of information now. But once again, thank you very much for taking the time to attend today. And if there's anything we can do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out to your CSM, and we're happy to get involved and do whatever we can to help. Thank you very much for taking the time for us today. Have a wonderful day. Oh, wait, we may have a question coming in. And maybe not. It looked like there was someone typing, but nothing came through. So again, thank you to everyone for attending today. We'll give you back a few minutes of your day, but if there's anything Crestwood can do to help, we're more than happy to discuss this further with you and assist with trying to maximize your supplier relationships. Thanks again, and we appreciate your time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.